In 2022, Debhani Escobar protested to bring awareness to the missing and murdered women of her home state of Nuevo Leon. She didn't know that within weeks, people would be marching in her name. I'm Charlie, and welcome to Crime Lines. Welcome to the 12 Days of Crime Lines, which is our 12 daily episodes. This case was researched with help from Haley Gray Research. This case takes place in Monterrey, Mexico, which is the second largest city in Mexico and has a population of over 1 million people in the city and 5 million in the metro area. And that's where Debhani Escobar was studying law. She was born in 2003, the only child to her parents, and she was described by her father as a very sensitive girl. Whether you were joking around with her or actually being mean, she took things to heart. She wanted to study the law because she was concerned about injustices, particularly against women, and she wanted to help people. Debhani, like a lot of women in Nuevo Leon, was concerned about a sharp uptick in violence against women in 2022. By April of that year, 31 women and girls had been reported missing, and 5 had been found dead. The other 26 remained missing. Debhani joined protests in March to demand the government do something about it. Being aware of these issues made Debhani and her friends that much more aware of their surroundings. They stuck together when they went out, particularly at night. So on April 8th, 2022, that's what they did. Debhani met up with her friend Yvonne and Sarai to go out around 10 p.m. Some sources say there was a third friend with them, but who was out with Debhani that night was misreported frequently, especially in the beginning. Debhani and her friends bounced from place to place until they ended up at an event space in the neighborhood of Nueva Castilla, which is in northern Monterrey. There was a party going on there, so they arrived around 1:20 in the morning. The women, however, were not alone, having gone to the party with guys that they had met up with that night, and then they met up with even more people at this party. They stayed for about 2.5 hours when everyone was finally ready to leave. According to her friends, some people who they didn't know had started leading Debhani out of the party, and they believed that these people were going to try to take advantage of her as she was intoxicated. When they saw this, they intervened, preventing them from leaving with her. Debhani then went and hid in the bathroom. Her friend said she was acting strangely and was angry at them that night, so they texted someone to come get Debhani around 4 a.m. The person they texted was 47-year-old Juan David Cuellar, who had driven them around earlier as he worked for a rideshare service in Mexico. It's called Didi, similar to Uber or Lyft. They had asked him for his number so they could contact him directly to pick them up after the party. So they trusted that they could reach out and have him get Debhani home safely. He was off the clock, but he agreed to come get her. Debhani's friends left with other people in a different car, and Debhani got into Juan's car, but she was not happy about it. According to Juan, she was complaining that her friends had just left her at the party alone and said that they were not good friends. Juan said he asked her for her address repeatedly so he knew where to bring her, but he couldn't get it out of her, so he texted the friends to ask them for it, but they did not respond right away. Debhani instead asked Juan to take her to another party nearby, but when they got there, Juan said she didn't get out of the car. A text response came from her friends with her home address, so he decided to just go ahead and take her there. But as they started driving, Juan said Debhani told him she wanted to get out. He also made a comment to a newspaper that she started slamming him, and he told her to get out. Regardless of who decided for Debhani to get out of the car, she did get out of the car, and Juan snapped a picture of her to document that she got out alive and well. He then texted her friends to let them know where she was. Juan said he then drove home and told his wife about what happened with Debhani and how she was acting. About 10 minutes later, he was still thinking about how he had just left her basically on the side of a highway, so he decided to drive back out to where she was to see if she was still in the area, but he didn't find her. The next morning, when Debhani never made it home, her family started calling around to her friends looking for her. When they reached the friends she was with the night before, they told her father, Mario, that Debhani had left in a different car than them because she wanted to be alone. But Juan said Debhani was annoyed with her friends that they had left her, leading her father, Mario, to say in an interview that there were just so many inconsistencies between the stories from the start. He said real friends would have made sure she got home safely and not left her. If they were mad at her because they were arguing, they could have just waited until they knew she was safe before they decided to just not be friends anymore. After talking to these friends and getting Juan's information, they did reach out to him, and that's how they got the picture that he had of her standing on the side of the road in the dark. So the family logged into Debhani's Instagram account and posted the picture, hoping it would garner tips. You can clearly see what she was wearing: a long skirt, a white tank top, and Converse shoes. The picture ended up going viral, bringing more awareness not just to this case, but to the epidemic of missing and murdered women in Mexico. Other cases, like that of Maria Fernanda Contreras, were getting more media attention alongside Debhani. Maria went missing after she went to look at a car to buy. Maria's body was found and her killer was caught, but having two cases like this hit the news in the same week sparked more protests against the government's inaction when it came to femicide. CBS News reported that around 10 women a day are murdered in Mexico, and according to Vice, 7 women go missing. Vice did a large article on the issues behind these disappearances, which will be listed in my sources. The Nuevo Leon Feminist Assembly told Vice that they believe the main factor behind women disappearing in these numbers is impunity. Basically, the authorities are not following proper protocols when it comes to missing people, including not acting in a timely manner. So people can kidnap women for trafficking or to kill them with little risk of getting caught. And that belief that they can get away with it is backed up by the United Nations, whose 2021 report on Mexico found only 2 to 6% of cases ended in a prosecution. We're talking about hundreds of murders with only a few dozen convictions. You would think that with so many missing and murdered, it would be bigger news, but for a long time the issue would be downplayed by authorities, and the media in turn would parrot that. They would say things like how the woman was out drinking, or she was out alone at night, or she must have been involved with the cartel or drugs somehow. It's framed as though she was a victim of her own choices and not the victim of an abductor or a killer. And you can see this in a statement made by Nuevo Leon's state prosecutor when discussing this case with the media. He said the main reason young women go missing is because they're rebellious. When that's the view of an officer of the court, you have to wonder how hard anyone is bothering to look for these women when they're first reported missing. It seems like what they're doing is waiting a few days, a week, maybe even longer before determining that these women or teens are really missing. And by that point, it's too late. But Debhani's case was treated a little differently because it did go viral on social media, meaning that it's not just the local or national press watching, but international. And her family used that attention to keep Debhani's face out there and to encourage people to search for her. And protesters who took to the streets to bring awareness to the fact that 18 women had disappeared in 1 month also brought media attention to the case. In one protest, when they were not allowed into the government building to continue their protest, they set the door on fire. On April 12th, a search party was formed at the Nueva Castilla motel, which was right in the area where Debhani was last seen. They searched the motel and the grounds and asked for CCTV footage, which the motel said they didn't have. Their cameras were live feed only. They didn't record or store footage. That same day, Juan, the driver, was arrested on unrelated charges, and they used his time in custody to ask him about Debhani. He told them his version of what happened, but the police were still suspicious. Juan did have a criminal record that included an investigation into attempted kidnapping and harassment. Though the police could not get footage from the motel, there were other cameras in the area and they reviewed them. What they saw did help piece some things together, and to Debahni's father, Mario, it told him why she demanded to be let out of Juan's car in the middle of the street. In one of the security shots that caught the car, Juan was turned around, and to Mario, it looked like he was touching Debahni on her breast. A journalist also reviewed this footage and reported that is what it looked like to him as well. Mario said this must have been why she got out of the car, as she would not have tolerated this man groping her. He asked the prosecutor's office if Juan could be charged for that, and they said no. They needed a complaining victim, and in this case, the alleged victim was missing. Additional footage told the police what happened after Debahni left Juan's vehicle. She could be seen walking along the road and stopping at a trucking company that was not far down the street. She was seen crossing the road at 4:30 in the morning, though the cameras did not catch whether she entered the building or not. It was reported that 40 videos had been pulled in the search for Debahni, but 11 days after she had gone missing, the police had only reviewed 15 to 20 of them, which was upsetting when her family learned this. Time was of the essence in finding her, and they didn't think the police were working hard enough. On April 19th, with pressure mounting, Nuevo Leon's governor said he would increase funding and resources to help combat gender violence. He warned that those who hurt the women of Nuevo Leon that they would be punished to the fullest extent of the law. People hoped it was a statement he meant and that it was not just performative. It was 2 days after that statement, on the evening of April 21st, that some employees of the Nueva Castilla motel said they noticed a terrible smell. It was coming from 3 unused water tanks, underground cisterns, that were in the area near an unused pool and a garden space. They called the police and officers arrived. They searched the area, and in one of the cisterns, they found Debahni's severely decomposed body. In another, they found her handbag, bra, and face mask, and her cell phone and keys were in the third. Due to the 12-foot depth of the cistern and the water that was in it, it took hours to recover her body. Her parents were only able to identify her because she was still wearing a crucifix that she always wore. We know that the area had been searched at least once, but Mario said it had actually been searched more like 4 times, and he couldn't imagine how they hadn't found her. The failure to fully search the area before marking it off was criticized, though some defended the searches, saying that the underground tanks were deep and difficult to see into. State authorities then announced that Debahni's death was an accident. She had walked onto the motel property and wandered around. She made her way to the cisterns and accidentally fell in and drowned. But the autopsy did not fully support this theory. The medical examiner determined that Debahni was dead between 5 days and 2 weeks. There was no water in her lungs, and the water itself was only 3 feet deep. Debahni could have easily stood up to avoid drowning. Instead, her cause of death was a blow to her head. So the question was, did the blow to her head happen before she went into the cistern, or did it happen in the fall? The family believed that Debahni had been killed elsewhere and dumped into the cistern, possibly after the initial searches of the motel. Mario wanted to see the case file, but the police denied his request. And then an unexpected tip came in. The motel said that they actually did have recorded footage, and they had recorded footage specifically of Debahni. It was about a month after she went missing, and they were suddenly like, oh yeah, we lied and we do have footage. From what has been said publicly, the footage showed Debahni running as she entered the hotel's entry road at 4:34 a.m. The entrance ran alongside a vacant restaurant before getting to the motel. The motel is literally the only thing you can get to along this path, since everything else is blocked off by high walls. From what has been seen, it didn't appear anyone else was with her or behind her. Then nearly 20 minutes later at 4:53 a.m., Debahni was seen on the garden side of the restaurant where the cisterns were. She was seen peeking into the windows of the restaurant. The last footage showed to the family was her walking alongside the fence near the cisterns. The only way to get to the cisterns in that pool garden area was to go through the restaurant. A large wall surrounds the entire compound and has barbed wire at the top. There is another tall wall blocking the motel from that garden area as well. So Debahni could not have gotten there any other way except to go through the restaurant. So the question is, how did she get into the restaurant? The motel was staffed 24 hours a day and had live feed security cameras by their own admission. The parking lot is fully lit, yet no one noticed Debahni walking around for at least 20 minutes. She went into a vacant restaurant and walked around an unused pool area with not a single person seeing her. The authorities have said that in all of the footage the motel has provided, Debahni is alone. However, the motel had this footage for a full month while lying about its existence, and then suddenly they produce it. There's a lot of suspicion that someone took the security footage and created selective cut footage, making sure that it's only showing Debahni alone in order to lead to the conclusion that she fell or entered the cisterns on her own. On April 22nd, a protest march was held demanding justice for Debahni. With the state so quick to label this an accident, they didn't believe they were going to fully investigate it. Between the protests, the media, and Debahni's family calling out the government for their inaction, they had to make a statement. Around 7:30 that night, the prosecutor's office said they were putting all of their resources into the investigation, and if there was a crime, they would find the person responsible and prosecute. The next day, Debahni was buried in her mother's hometown after her parents had a second independent autopsy done. The family buried her so quickly because her remains were in such bad shape. Also, after the burial, the police would allow Mario to read the police files that they had previously denied him access to. He said the files showed the holes in the investigation and only upset him more. In late April, Vice reported on what they dubbed a shame campaign related to Debahni. According to activists, the government purposely put out information that would blame Debahni in various ways for what happened, including having Juan and her friends tell their stories to the media, emphasizing that she was drunk, confused, and to some degree, belligerent. It was designed to show that she was drunk and acting irrational, and that's why what happened to her happened. The accusation is that the goal of these reports was to get the public to stop caring. But it didn't work thanks to the family. In May, the results of the second autopsy the family had done were leaked to the media. Mario said he sent the report to the Attorney General's office and that they were the ones who leaked it. This autopsy, done by an independent forensics group, found that Debahni was not just murdered, but she had been sexually assaulted as well. Rather than a single blow to the head being the cause of death, she had actually been struck multiple times. The Attorney General's office's position, however, remained that this was an accidental death caused by falling into the cistern, and they used the first autopsy as evidence. So then a third autopsy was ordered to clarify the inconsistencies between the first and the second. Debahni's body had to be exhumed for this, which was very difficult for her parents. Now, this autopsy ruled that Debahni had died of asphyxia by suffocation due to an obstruction of her nose and mouth. However, the report didn't specify what had blocked them. This time, the medical examiner said there were no signs of sexual violence, and Debahni had been dead just 3 to 5 days before her body was found, which was shocking because she had been missing for 2 weeks. This third autopsy was designed to clear up confusion, but only caused more. The investigation at this point really seemed to stall out. On August 18th, 2022, the local authorities turned it over to the Attorney General's office. In January of 2023, 2 of the motel employees, both women, were charged with making false declarations and concealment of information. I can't find the details on this, but I imagine it's connected to withholding the video footage. As her parents are still fighting for answers, they've taken up offers for speaking engagements to share their story and to share Debahni's story with young women. Their hope is that these young women can learn how to protect themselves, even in situations where they feel safe, like a night out with friends. Anyone with information on the suspicious death of Debahni Escobar, you can call the FGR at 55-5346-0000.